And go.
Resto Mod Daisy with part 2 of our exploration, our examination, our explanations of the Daisy Model 140 Defender. Now, as you recall from the last episode, we disassembled the gun, had a little bit of wiggles there, and in the meantime, I've been able to figure out how to put this thing back together correctly. So let's jump right to the trigger assembly. Here it is. It's a little bit different than a standard trigger because it has an arm sticking out here the back. That is an integral part of the safety. It is also a little different from a standard folded metal trigger because it's got a secondary sear. So the way that works is this just kind of drops in here. That hole lines up. Bring it up like that. And when you go to install it in the gun, the trigger bolt, I'm going to get this lined up just perfect.
The woes of the holes.
Alright, so when you get it in there and the bolt can clear, this is how the assembly will work. Now, you ask yourself, where does that spring bind? There's nothing for that spring to bind on. You are correct, because it will bind on the bolt assembly itself once the trigger is installed. Now, when I took it apart, I unwisely removed the trigger first because that's what I always do with a folded metal trigger. I was not aware of the fact that there was a spring in the assembly that would be binding on the bolt assembly. So, I'm going to show you how to, well, we've showed you how to assemble the trigger now. That's exactly what it ought to look like. And to reassemble the gun, we're going to put it back in the gun. So the first step is put the trigger in. So let me back over here and get to my work area.
Okay.
So just kind of simply slide it in. Drop it down, wiggle it about like you would normally do with a Daisy. There we go, until you can get her upright. Now, here's the critical part. You might have wiggled your, yes, and we did wiggle our thing around a little, our sear. So we got to get that respotted to make sure it's in the hole, because if it's not in the hole, the bolt won't go. So that's about what it looks like. So we'll go back through that experiment and we'll get it so that we can see the hole. Can you see the hole through there? Kind of, sort of?
Yeah,
kind of,
sort of.
All right, well, trust me, they're lined up. So now we'll take our trigger bolt, we'll drop it through there, and we'll invert a little bit so we can see. I know, it's hard it's very difficult.
Well, you have to see it. They don't really need to see it. So.
All right, so now we have
hold
our...
on, we're pausing. Give me a second.
All right, so now that the trash truck has moved on to new locales, we've got the trigger in the gun. We've got the trigger bolt through the trigger. Let me show you that. Right there. And now it's located...
Hold on. You're going too fast, sir. I have to, focus the camera, do all the work, All right.
Okay, so we got the trigger. We got the bolt. It's holding it in place. You notice where the spring's at.
Yeah.
Right there. Okay, that'll be important later on.
Cool.
So now we'll secure the trigger, and then we'll install the bolt action safety.
Wow.
All right, so let's double check it and make sure we can see our little spring there. Yep, we can see the spring. Let me see if I can find a pointer real quick. This was fun. There is the spring that we're talking about, and it needs to be in this position before we slip that bolt in, because the bolt is what's going to bear on the trigger and provide tension to the sear. Okay, now let's take a look at our mysterious bolt. Our mysterious bolt has a spring. The spring is installed through the center of the bolt to a little stud on the inside of the bolt there, like so. Now, when we go to install this, we will compress the spring, and the spring will provide some tension to the bolt body so it doesn't just flop around when it's being cycled. Now, before we do that, let's take a look at the bolt itself. You'll notice that the bolt has a couple of odd holes in it, and it has also got a series of 2 additional pieces of steel. The bolt body, the first ring, and the second ring, and you'll notice that they have been bronze welded in place. So these interior pieces of steel do not rotate. They stay put where they're at. That's what they're designed for. And you'll notice a slot right here. Now that slot lines up directly with the extended sear on the trigger that we looked at before we installed it. And that's what enables this safety to work. Also, at the front, you'll notice there's a small piece of steel that sticks out the front. a measured length, and this in turn will bear on the plunger assembly when the gun is cocked. So when the gun is cocked, the plunger comes back and pushes the safety, and it doesn't move very far because the stock bolt makes it operate in this slot right here. So this is what, excuse me, this is what enables the bolt to open when the gun is cocked, and then the sears engage the bolt. And so to shoot the gun, you have to push it back down to clear that slot, so that, oh, here we go again with the hard to see part, so that, where's my pointer, so that that little slot right there, that little piece of steel there, can move.
Let me zoom in.
That little piece of steel there can move as we see with the trigger. See how that moves up to release the sear?
Oh, they do now.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what that's all about. All right. So let's go ahead and stick our spring in our bolt. We'll lodge it on. There's a little nub there for it to sit on, so it doesn't have to wander on its own. Now, in the literature that I researched, there's supposed to be a little red dot here, and that lets you know the gun can fire. But as you can see, time has taken care of the dot. It's disappeared. I'm not sure that the owner wants me to put a dot there, because I only saw the reference in one piece of literature. So now, you'll notice the slot here. The top stock screw will ride that slot, and that's what will cause the bolt to rotate when the lever or when the plunger assembly pushes back on it. So we bring it back to this point, and you kind of push it down. It's gonna fiddle with you a little bit.
Oh, surprise!
But there we are. Now we have tension. Now you'll notice that the slot here, you know, as the bolt pushes backwards, it twists. That's what the slot's all about. So we're going to bring the slot up to this bearing point. We're going to look inside, and we're going to see. We're going to see that our spring that powers the sear is binding on this, and we're going to see that with the bolt in the down position, the trigger itself can move. But when the bolt is popped up, when you cock the gun, the bolt automatically pops up, and that blocks the sear from working, which is a safety. I mean, that's a mechanical safety, a robust, simple mechanical safety that works, so that after you've levered the gun and slapped the lever back to the stock, to shoot it, you have to push it down, and that lets the sear move. Ain't that cool?
Fun.
No electronics, just mechanics. It's fabulous. And that's how this system works.
All right.
So, reinstallation on this, as I told you before, if you ever take one of these apart, the first thing you want to do is pull the top stock screw and extract the bolt. Then you can remove your trigger with no issues, because it'll stay as a unified body. And that is how the trigger and the safety on the 140 Defender works. Kind of cool.
Nice.
Anyway, putting it back